You are now listening to Just Another Year with Nick Rohde and Ryan Shadman. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Just Another Year Chicago, hosted by myself, Nick Rohde, and my co-host, Ryan Shadman, who unfortunately cannot be here today. And today we're going to be going over a more level-headed approach to what happened in the Chicago Bears against the Detroit Lions game this past weekend, and what to expect against the Texans this upcoming weekend at Soldier Field. Followed by the Chicago Bulls starting their preseason this Friday night against the Houston Rockets, the Cubs, and some big White Sox news from this week so far, and a quick NHL update, all wrapped up by College Hoops. Again, please make sure to hit the subscribe button to stay up to date on all of our content, and make sure to follow Ray and I on Twitter, at Chicago Nick or at JChicagoRay to talk sports. So to start, we're going to be talking more in detail on the Detroit Lions game. A few key points that I want to hit on today is that toward the end of the game was Matt Nagy calling the plays. And I know I talked about this a little bit in the last podcast, but they never showed Bill Lazor like they did against the Packers. And that was kind of a heads up for everyone that was watching and kind of saying, what's going on here? Like, why is Matt Nagy looking at his play card? Why is he talking into his headset? Is he talking to Mitch? And and after that, a report came out in his interview that he still feels he has the support of the front office. So that kind of threw everyone off and kind of was like, okay, this guy clearly has no idea what he's talking about, isn't thinking very clearly, and probably knows that his time in Chicago is coming to a very, very pleasant end for Chicago Bears fans. So that's something that we really want to think about today. And going off that, a lot of people have been saying that Mitch Trubisky never lived up to his hype as the Chicago Bears quarterback. He's the one to blame in that game. Mitch was 4-0 against the Lions entering that game. He also had he's had multiple 300-yard games against the Lions. Some of his best games of his career have come against the Detroit Lions. And he played what I thought was a great game in the first half. In the second half, he looked like a completely different type of player. He was, not looking as comfortable in the pocket. Plays, he was looking a little bit confused, throwing to the wrong receiver. He had a wide open Allen Robinson on a few plays, one entering the end zone. And it looked like Bill Lazor was not calling those plays. And also, if Matt Nagy was calling the plays, he has not done what he had to do in order to help make Mitch the best quarterback he can be. He was not going to be he was never destined to be a Mahomes or a Watson. Everyone, when they drafted him at number 2, moved up to draft him at number 2 back in 2017, kind of scratched their heads, and we're all still scratching our heads right now. But looking back on it, and Foles coming in, is Mitch really to blame? Not only for the Detroit game, but for this interesting career as a Chicago Bears quarterback. And what's crazy to think is that he is considered one of the better quarterbacks in this franchise's very long history. Like I said, he played a lot better against Detroit. He did what was asked to stay in the game. And that call, there was 2 calls that should have never happened. The one where he fumbled, that should have been a run up the gut. That was the only time I would ever agree with a draw play. It was 3rd and 3. Montgomery easily could have gotten that, especially with how the Lions defense was playing. And then obviously the final play of the game that ended up the Bears losing the game. 4th and 1, and you run a draw there. Now, the Lions know that the Bears are a very draw favorite team. That is not the call that you want to have going into that situation, especially with the game on the line. You want to get at least a little interesting. And if Bill Lazor and Matt Nagy thought they were fooling anyone, Ray and I were sitting watching the game and going, he's definitely going to call a draw play right now. So you're not even fooling your own fans, Nagy. You're not even fooling your own fans, Bill Lazor. Though Bill Lazor, I believe, is a better offensive coordinator and play caller for the Chicago Bears. In this moment, I wish that, one, Mitch would have been the quarterback the whole season. I feel like he could have built consistency and also maybe 1-2 out of this 6-game losing streak. So the Bears would actually be sitting at 7-5 instead of 5-7. Santos' missed extra point was also proved to be critical for the Bears. It was not his fault. I mean, Santos has been a blessing, considering the Bears have been looking for that consistent kicker over the last couple seasons. Not saying Eddie Pinheiro is a bad kicker, but Santos' extra point miss very early in the game proved to be a factor, because if Santos would have hit that earlier in the beginning of the game, he would have just had to hit a field goal on that 4th down. The game would have gone to overtime, and who knows, the Bears could have come out with a W on top after all. But you can't blame him too much. He's had a phenomenal season, and it was a block. That's on his blockers. That's on everyone that's in front of him. That's not on him, not like he double doinked like Cody Parkey did against the Eagles a couple years back. So I don't think anyone went to blame Santos for this loss. He did what he had to do. If you're blaming anyone, it would be the special teams offensive line to try to hold down Lions defenders. But there's nothing you can do. And the worst part about it all is even after this Bears loss, the Bears still are technically in the playoff race. I'm still sticking to my guns from the podcast last week, that the Bears are done. The Bears are 5-7 on a 6-game losing streak. Though they do play multiple teams, their next 3 out of their 4 games are teams with under 500 records. I still would not, 500 or below, I would not put the Bears as favorites for this Sunday's game against the Texans. You have Deshaun Watson. You have a better Texans team in the second half of the year. The Texans still have an opportunity to make the playoffs, but the Bears have no business being in the playoffs this year, because if they do go, it's going to be an embarrassment, and it's going to frustrate fans even more because of the fact that Matt Nagy would end up staying. I mean, you can't fire a coach that goes into the playoffs, even though the Bears did get rid of Lovie Smith after a 10-6 season, just missing the playoffs, which obviously 10-6, most other seasons will get you in. The Bears would end up keeping Nagy. The Bears would end up keeping Pace, and you can't trust either one of them. So I'm saying that the Bears are done. The Bears should lose out, at least beat the Jacksonville Jaguars, or if you're going to lose to the Jaguars, you got to beat Green Bay. And I think that would be good entering next season. But the Bears could still land a top 10 pick if they were to lose out or to only lose one game. But there's a bunch of scenarios for that. And Ray and I have our notes that we discussed earlier. We're going to get into a little bit of who we would want as our first-round pick this upcoming offseason. So what's next? On to the Texans. A few things that need to happen in order for the Bears to somehow win this game, or at least make it competitive, is the offensive line needs to continue to prove itself. Over the last 2 games, I feel the offensive line has played its best that it has all season, and that's something that's key and something good for fans to look forward to for next year. A lot of these guys are rookies. A lot of these guys are unproven, undrafted, and we can keep them for cheap if they're going to continue to play well. We are also playing without James Daniels and Bobby Massey. I don't believe Bobby Massey or Robert Leno will be, or Charles Leno, excuse me. Charles Leno will not be on the roster next year. Both have high contracts, have not proven themselves to be worthy of those contracts, and the Bears will either eat the cap or somehow trade them for a 6th or 7th round pick. I highly doubt any team would take them, but who knows? The Jets could possibly do it. They've done crazier things. Speaking of that, they're also, if the season finishes, 6-10, 7-9. I'm hoping 6-10. Bears fans have to look at this as people were right that they were pretenders, and no one said. Everyone said, but then the Texans. Speaking upon the Texans were talked about being a competitive team for somewhat of the season. They, walking in, they looked good, and then the second they got rid of Hopkins, all of a sudden the whole Texans dynamic changed. But you can't count out the Texans when you have Deshaun Watson on the other side of the ball. So with that, there's got to be a way to somehow shut down Watson. He's going to use his feet. He's going to be fast. I would like to see Robert Quinn come out and make some plays. He's still just not coming up to the hype. And that's very frustrating for all Chicago Bears fans, as they, it was supposed to be the dynamic duo. Like, we got rid of Leonard Floyd. And Leonard Floyd's one of the best edges in the league this year so far. So I don't think it was also Leonard Floyd's fault. I think it's more on Chuck Pagano, but we'll get to that in a little bit. We want to keep Montgomery and Patterson backfield working. Obviously, we've seen it over the last 2 games, and it has worked well. Defenses are struggling to stop them. Not saying that, Green Bay or Detroit have the best run defenses in the league, but they're not the worst. And I think that, Patterson, I was a hater of Patterson at running back at first, but he just bulldozes through people. He's a big guy. He's kind of like a Derrick Henry, but Patterson does it all. He puts his heart in every single play, and as a Bears fan, as any NFL fan, you have to respect that. So, and then Montgomery, for the line that he has, he's making plays. A lot of people are like, why didn't you just keep Jordan Howard? Jordan Howard would have worked good when our line was bad because he's a power back. He just powers through people. But Montgomery, with the way that he's not that kind of back, but he's making plays for himself. So that's super exciting to see. I think that the Bears keep this dynamic duo going. Maybe throw Lamar Miller in there every now and then. That would be personal preference. But again, you have a Pro Bowl running back as your third stringer. Give him a shot. Don't want to put chance of injury on Patterson, as he is the best kick returner in the league. He just makes plays overall. They combined for 3 rushing touchdowns against the Lions. Can't ask for much more than that. So, as a much needed Bears run game, keep this duo going, walking into the Texans game, and, just keep it going. It also gives more opportunity for Mitch to throw, and that's the next point, is throw Allen Robinson the deep ball. We've seen it thrown to Mooney, and unfortunately it's been overthrown, or there's been a penalty. But when it has worked, Mooney has caught it and got it for deep gains. I would like to see the same for Allen Robinson. He's one of the best wide receivers in the league. He needs to build momentum and, make a point that he wants to say. He is upset on the field. He claims he's not focusing on it. But Allen Robinson, like any other player who knows their value, is going to be upset on the field when they're not getting paid. And the fact that he's not getting paid, still performing, he's not really talking to anybody. He's kind of walking out there like, I'm here to do my job and, tell other teams like I'm still good, should tell Ryan Pace something. If he were to somehow stay, no matter who is the Bears' next GM, they have to bring back Allen Robinson if you want Mitch Trubisky or whoever your next quarterback is, who I would like Zach Wilson from BYU, which we'll get into that in a second. But man, you need to keep a wide receiver like that because he's a great mentor for these young guys moving forward. So going off that, I know I hit on it a little bit, but the defense has to get their hands on Deshaun Watson. Robert Quinn, again, needs to make a proving point to himself. Khalil Mack needs to start making plays again. He's been very quiet the second half of the season. But he was actually, from fans' perspective, was Defensive Player of the Year entering Week 8, and now, obviously, it's kind of going to T.J. Watt. It's going to go to Aaron McDonald. It's going to go to someone like that. So, and I know Mack has been playing hurt. I don't know if anyone knows that. He's been struggling all season with back injuries from either carrying the team on his back or, obviously just the injury of just being a defensive end. There's a lot of toughness that goes into that. And for him to be out there every single game, you have to game plan around him even if he's hurt. Or else then you have to go to Akeem Hicks. No one has to worry about Robert Quinn right now. So overall, you just need to find a way to get pressure on Watson, get a pick. I think that's what the defense also needs. And Chuck Pagano, just be aggressive. You need to be as aggressive as possible with this defense. You have ball hawks in the background, but you're playing too much zone. And, my dad always says it. He's always said it. Why are you playing zone? Why are you playing zone? I have to agree with him. Don't play zone. You have some of the best corners in the league. Jalen Johnson is the best rookie corner in the league by stats and by personal opinion being a Chicago Bears fan. But you also have, a great veteran in Kyle Fuller. You have Gibson Sr., and then obviously you have Eddie Jackson. You have safety back there. Don't worry about it. Your only worry is Buster Screen. And if you're playing Buster Screen because, you can't trust him, sure, he had a good play last week against Houston. He also gave up the Lions. But he also gave up a touchdown. So you can't defend this guy. I would throw in Houston Carson. I know that or Deion Bush, they're definitely better than Buster Screen. So I believe also Buster Screen will be gone off the team next season to save cap, to bring in either a big name offensive lineman. A lot of cap is going to be played with this upcoming offseason. I don't believe Buster Screen will be back. But again, going back to the whole story, Chuck Pagano, you need to play more aggressive defense. You need to blitz these quarterbacks. You have the defensive line to do it. Sure, you don't have Eddie Goldman, but Bilal Nichols is showing that he is one of the best late defensive picks of that draft. That is one thing that Ryan Pace has always done well, is he drafted Eddie Jackson in the 4th, Bilal Nichols in the later round. He gets these, Darnell Mooney in the 5th round. He gets these and then Jalen Johnson, he gets all these guys Jalen Johnson was a projected 1st-round pick in the draft. He's salty because he was a 2nd-round pick, which is still, pretty good to anyone's standards. But he gets these later guys who have a chip on their shoulder or are good players, and that's the one thing that Pace does well. But, again, you have a great defense. Don't be afraid of it. Danny Trevathan's also playing a lot better, Bears inside linebacker. He's playing better even though he is getting older. I personally would not go with Trevathan next year. I love him. He has a lot of heart in the locker room, or he would have to understand that his role is going to be demoted. So that's just what the Bears need to do going into the Texans game. Game predictions. Ray predicted that the Texans were going to win this game 31-21, and I predicted that the Texans are going to win against the Chicago Bears 28-24. I still think that it's going to be a close game like the Lions, even though the Lions game we should have won, obviously. Losing the game with 4 minutes and 31 seconds left is ridiculous on any count, but I believe that it's going to be a competitive game, but when you have Deshaun Watson as your quarterback, the Texans are definitely going to pull away with this one. And then finally, quickly hitting on the Bears' potential draft candidates for this upcoming season. So if the Bears get a top 10 pick, obviously you're going to get one of the best players in this year's NFL draft, which is loaded with talent. If the Bears were to go with a quarterback in the first round, I would take Zach Wilson out of BYU. He's a swag. He's got a lot of swag. He's a little cocky on the field. Mitch just doesn't look confident sometimes. But he would walk out there kind of like a Tyler Hero, Miami Heat's young player who has just that swagger. And the last time the Bears had a quarterback from BYU or drafted a quarterback from BYU was our Super Bowl quarterback. So with an elite defense. So, you don't need to be good to be on the Bears team. You don't need to be a great quarterback to be on the Bears team, even though Bears fans would love it. You just need to be average to good. And that's fine with us. And Zach Wilson, I think, he's mobile. He has a cannon. He's done pretty well for himself. He has a great resume at BYU. He's played more than one season of college football. For those who don't know, Mitch Trubisky only played one full season of collegiate football for North Carolina, which isn't the most competitive division. And BYU obviously has had some great talent. Jim McMahon, Steve Young, Hill on the New Orleans Saints is also from BYU. So there is talent that comes out of BYU. I like Zach Wilson a lot. But if we were to go in the direction of offensive line, which I believe we do need to do, I would definitely go after Alabama left tackle Alex Leatherwood, standing at 6'6", 322 pounds, with an honorable mention of Jalen Mayfield from Michigan at 6'6", 319 pounds. Anything's an upgrade from Leno. Dad, I hope you're listening. Anything's an upgrade from Leno, especially with that price contract. So if we're able to either chew a little bit of cap or have a agreeable buyout, I think that that works in the Bears' favor. So again, Alex Leatherwood or Jalen Mayfield as left tackle, and then Zach Wilson as quarterback. We will have a mock draft coming up in the next couple months going forward, but for now we are just going to keep it real. So again, game predictions is Nick 28-24 Texans and Ray 31-21 Texans. Moving on, I know our listener Jeremy Godzicki, I told you earlier this week that I would be choosing my new team coming into the season. Unfortunately, due to Ray not being here, I'm unable to make that pick right now. So I will be choosing my team besides the Bears to root for in the playoffs. That's for sure going to be in the playoffs this upcoming season. And just to make it clear, I will not be choosing the Green Bay Packers or the Minnesota Vikings if they were to make the playoffs. And if the Lions were to somehow do it, with the very slim chance, neither is them. The only NFC North team I will ever cheer for is the Chicago Bears. So with that, moving forward, we're going to go into a lighter subject. The Chicago Bulls open up their preseason this Friday night against the Houston Rockets at the United Center. There will be no fans for the beginning of the season, which was expected, obviously, due to COVID-19. But it's going to be nice knowing that there's someone else besides the Chicago Bears to cheer on and watch. And the Bulls are going to be exciting. There's a lot to look forward for with this franchise. The last 2 years have been very hard with our last GM duo of Garb Foreman and John Paxson, who have made some very questionable decisions for the team, such as Cristiano Felicio signing a few years back, who has barely played more than a dozen games since signing a 4-year, $36 million contract 4 years ago. Trading for Otto Porter Jr., who cannot follow COVID-19 protocol from the NBA's guidelines and is out partying. Even though Otto Porter Jr. is reported back to camp, he is still practicing with the Chicago Bulls, but just another questionable pick. And overall, just the Bulls franchise, they cleaned house. Just like with the Bears, like what Ray and I have been saying about the Chicago Bears, they actually cleaned house, and there's a lot to look forward to, especially with Billy Donovan as your head coach, who developed Kevin Durant, James Harden, Russell Westbrook, Steven Adams, big name athletes that are all stars now. I'm very excited. And then also back in college when he coached at Florida, Bradley Beal, Joakim Noah, just big name players that are going to go out there and make a splash. Billy Donovan has one of the youngest cores in the league with Wendell Carter Jr., Zach Lavine, Lauri Markkanen, Coby White, Patrick Williams. The list goes on. A very young Chicago Bulls team. It's going to be very fun to watch. So I think that one thing that you have to look forward to Friday night's game is that I think that the Bulls need to throw out their starting five for a good amount of time and let them gel together. I don't care if it's, the Houston throwing out G Leaguers. I'd be shocked if they threw out James Harden, one of the best players in the NBA currently. Also, John Wall, new acquisition from the Washington Wizards for Russell Westbrook, which I do think that Houston won that trade. I think that the Bulls need to play hard, make it competitive, play with a sense of urgency. A lot of these guys have been dying to get back on a basketball court and play. I mean, the bubble definitely was not the same. The COVID-19 playoff bubble that was held in Orlando that ended not too long ago for the Los Angeles Lakers and Miami Heat. I think that the Bulls are just super hungry. Zach Lavine's looking great in practice. So far, everyone is. Billy Donovan and Coby White have both mentioned that Coby White is planning to be point guard one, which is super exciting for the future of the Chicago Bulls, especially that Coby White was averaging 25 points in his last 6 games, which were all after the All-Star break, and almost a double-double, I believe, with 8 or 9 assists per game. So definitely very exciting. I think that he was a great draft pick from North Carolina, and I'm very excited for Coby White this upcoming season. And then another thing is that I really want to see Patrick Williams out there. Patrick Williams was the Bulls' 4th overall pick this year. Was a great selection in my opinion. I know there was a lot of question going into it, but he is a big physical 19-year-old that can go out there, dunk, shoot threes, play really good defense. I think that the Bulls made an absolute splash with this guy, and hearing that other teams were trying to trade up to get Patrick Williams at 3 truly shows something. And we didn't have March Madness this last March, which impacts a lot of what what the sports world thinks of people going into the NBA draft. So who knows? I think Patrick Williams is a great addition, even if he doesn't start, because due to Otto Porter Jr. probably going to start over him if he's still a Chicago Bull or if the Bulls choose to go in that direction. Patrick Williams will be 6th man of the year and rookie of the year. So that's a very big take when you have guys like Lou Williams in the league. But Patrick Williams, definitely, a lot of people are sleeping on him. I don't think they should, and very excited for this young guy. Again, play hard, go out there. I have the Rockets still beating the Bulls, which is fine. It's preseason. Don't expect the Bulls to be an NBA champion caliber team this year. They're got to gel, but they're getting there. They're still very young. Again, one of their guys is 19 years old. I say the Rockets win 101, Bulls 97. But again, who knows what's going to come into play, how everyone's going to do, if James Harden or John Wall even play for more than a minute. But we'll have to see on that. Other NBA news, just kind of going back to the Bulls real fast. Bulls were ranked 24th in the league. Last season, they were ranked 26th, so one of the worst. So there's a 2-point bump, even after not having a very aggressive free agent acquisition time. But again, they did go after a very dominant college star, even though he was a 6th man out of Florida State. The Bulls definitely are on the rise, and ESPN even wrote that, watch out, this team actually might make some noise. I like this. It puts a little fire under them. I think, again, the Bulls roster makes a 7th or 8th seed if they were to make the playoffs. They're definitely not the team that they were a year ago, so that's very exciting. The LA Lakers are still at number 1. You can't blame them when you have Anthony Davis and LeBron James in your lineup, followed by the Bucks, the Nets, and the Clippers. So not surprised by any of these. All 4 teams stayed pretty similar in depth, walking out of last season. I think the Bucks need to win it all this year in order for Giannis Antetokounmpo, who is one of the premier players in the league, to stay in Milwaukee. Again, Milwaukee is a small market team. What I mean by small market is that they're not a major city. There's not as much opportunity to make money or have a large fan base. So I think that Giannis needs to win a championship in Milwaukee this year in order to stay, or else he's going to go take his talents to a bigger market, such as New York, Brooklyn, Chicago, Los Angeles, a bigger market for basketball that could do well for themselves. The Clippers, I don't think are going to do well this year. There was a lot of hype that they were going to be potentially better or just as equal with the LA Lakers last year, and I didn't feel that one bit watching them play. There's a lot of bad vibes in the locker room currently with the Clippers, stemming really from Paul George. So I think that the Clippers, they're going to be competitive. They'll make the playoffs, but this is the last year they're going to have like a total dynamite roster. I feel like it's kind of like back when the Nets had Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett, and Joe Johnson on the roster, who back then you look at that roster and you go, oh man, watch out. It's like the big three in Boston when they won with Kevin Garnett, Ray Allen, and Kevin Pierce, or Paul Pierce, but Rajon Rondo also helped out with that squad. So I don't think the Clippers are going to do that great this year, but who knows, prove me wrong. And then the Golden State Warriors, who have been one of the best teams over the last 10 years, is at number 13. Why is this? Because we mentioned this last time. Klay Thompson, one of the premier shooters in the league, one of the best overall players in the league, is out this whole entire season, now with an Achilles injury. So, heartbreaking for Warriors fans, hard for the whole league, because Klay Thompson's just that guy that you can't hate him. He's just on the court. He's nice to everybody. He's a great teammate. He does great for the community. But I still think the Warriors make the playoffs this year. I don't know how deep they'll go. Klay Thompson was a huge part of that. But we'll see. Moving on to the Chicago Cubs. Not much about the Cubs from the last time we talked about the Len Casper going over to the Chicago White Sox. The Cubs have not made really any big free agency splashes this offseason so far, which we're about to get into the White Sox. The White Sox have done some really big things so far over the last 48 hours. But they have too much money tied up into their current roster. It's a big question for new general manager Jed Hoyer. What are you going to do? What do you do with this Cubs roster who is projected to win multiple World Series? And yes, they did win back in 2016, which, thank goodness, the curse is over. But now that the Cubs they made the playoffs the following year, and then they came back a little bit this year, but they were eliminated in the first round by the Miami Marlins, who is a young up-and-coming team. When the Cubs were like, oh man, the Cubs could make some noise. They can actually make a World Series title run again during this weird COVID-19 season. I want to see them win one more. I think that this roster could do it. From fielding-wise and the bats, if the bats weren't just so home run heavy, they need to go out and make sure that they get another ace. So, there's a lot of aces this year that the Cubs can go after. Maybe get rid of Quintana's contract, bring in, a younger guy. But I'm pretty confident in the Cubs moving into the season. Alec Mills, throwing a no-hitter this year. I know that, again, it was COVID baseball, but, a no-hitter is impressive no matter what. So he was kind of a shock to the Cubs rotation this year. And then you have Kyle Hendricks, who's, a dominant has been dominant the last couple of years. He has his highs and his lows. And then Yu Darvish. So you already have 3 for sure strong starting pitchers in today's MLB. Unfortunately, I don't think the Cubs are going to be bringing back John Lester, even though I would love it if he were to take it on a veteran's minimum. But they would probably do what they did with John Lackey back in 2016 and make him a reliever, which I don't know if Lester would be willing to do that. But if he would be, I would love to see him back. He would be a great addition to the Cubs bullpen, teaching some of these younger arms that are in the bullpen right now. So who knows? We'll have to see moving forward exactly what goes on with the Chicago Cubs. But, moving on to the Chicago White Sox, they made 2 big splashes yesterday on December 8th, trading for 33-year-old pitcher Lance Lynn from the Rangers for 25-year-old Dane Dunning and prospect Avery Weems. They also brought back Adam Eaton on a 1-year, $7 million contract. So the Sox went from, Ray and I talked about our last podcast, from winning 90 games in the division to honestly being World Series contenders. They have a super young roster like the Cubs had back in 2016. They brought in a veteran ace, just like John Lester, and they brought in a veteran that has won a World Series recently to help show these other guys, kind of like the Cubs did with Ben Zobrist, who ended up being our World Series MVP. Overall, I think the Sox are dangerous. I see why they did it. They needed older experience on the roster. They needed roster pieces that were, kind of one and done. Like, hey, we're going to go out and try to win this thing this year, but we still need you to prove yourself to us. Even though Adam Eaton, I think, deserved at least a 2-year contract, just for that stability, like, okay, I'm going to be with this roster. I'm still going to play hard for them, in regards to that. But again, they're a young roster. They're very good overall, and they can win the division, no doubt, especially against, a pretty tough Minnesota Twins team. And you can't count out the Cleveland Indians. So, White Sox fans, be very excited for this upcoming season. I would be if I was a diehard Sox fan. I am a diehard Cubs fan, and obviously if I had to choose between the two, during the Crosstown Classic, I choose the Cubs every time. But, I would like to see the White Sox do well. I know a lot of White Sox fans said to me, especially my neighbors, my childhood neighbors, they're diehard Sox fans. And they were happy when the Cubs won the World Series. I'd be happy to see the Sox win the World Same with my grandfather, who is probably the biggest White Sox fan in the entire world, when almost all of our family is Cubs fans. And he even said, I'm so happy to see the Cubs win the World Series. So I would be so happy if I saw the Chicago White Sox win the World Series. It brings joy to the city. I'd clap. I wouldn't shake my head and be like, phooey. Like, no. I think that it's an exciting time to be a Chicago White Sox fan, so good for you guys. Quickly hitting on the Chicago Blackhawks, the NHL came to an agreement to start the season on January 13, 2021. So 2 Chicago teams to cheer for at one time, unless the Bears somehow so that would be the Bulls and the Blackhawks, both in the United Center. And if the Bears, again, were to somehow make the playoffs this year, there'd be 3 for a short minute, but super exciting to finally have more than one team to cheer on and a consistent team night in, night out. One night the Bulls will be playing, one night the Hawks will be playing in theory, so that's super exciting. More to come on that later, but we're very excited to see that, especially with a Blackhawks team that did make the NHL COVID bubble playoffs last year and played decently well until against the Las Vegas Golden Knights. Quick in college hoops, Illinois with the big win over Duke at Duke on December 8th. That's big, especially for them trying to get back into the AP top 5. So all the Illini fans, I know Ray is super excited about it. He was calling me last night, and he was like, man, I cannot believe this. You have no idea how exciting this is. So good for you, good for Illini fans. Very excited for you. I think that the win over Duke definitely kind of puts the whole rest of college basketball on notice. So congratulations to you guys. And then me talking about Illinois State, they play Ball State this Saturday night. I think the Birds have a shot at winning this game. Ball State just got by their last game against UIC, who are 3-1, but still, Ball State is just winning games. So I don't feel very confident in Ball State. I think that the Redbirds come out and beat Ball State at Ball State. And then once the Birds get back playing in the Valley, I'm very confident in their chances. There's Bradley in the league, which is always tough. You have Loyola, who went to the Final Four a few years back. So I think they have a good shot at winning Arch Madness or making it to the championship game in Arch Madness. So hopefully we'll be able to see that live in person this year. St. Louis is always a great time. If you've never been, it's awesome. So very exciting for Redbirds as well. And with that, we're going to wrap up today's episode of Just Another Year. Our next episode is this upcoming Sunday night, as always, to recap the Bears and Texans. Our first reactions to the Chicago Bulls this past Friday night. And even though it's preseason, and hopefully some more exciting news from the Cubs, Blackhawks, and White Sox. So again, please make sure to follow us on all social media platforms. We are on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and then we also are featured on SoundCloud, Spotify, and we'll also be posting this on YouTube. So again, please hit that subscribe button to stay up to us. Comment your thoughts on this post, and we look forward to seeing you guys in the near future. Thanks, guys. Stay safe. Thank you again for listening in to Just Another Year Chicago with Nick Rohde and Ryan Chapman. We'll see you guys next time.